Welcome to Echoes from the Mountain Creative Sparks, the podcast where we explore the incredible power of hobbies and crafts and the natural world to nurture our mental health. I'm your host, Loraine from Gracious Mountain Therapies, and I believe that the passions we pursue outside of our daily routines can be our strongest allies in finding joy, building resilience, and weathering life's storms. Today, I am welcoming back my mother, June Heaton, this time for a D-Day special, where she is going to share with us a few childhood memories about her father, who was one of the brave sailors who fought during World War II. Both my maternal and paternal grandfathers were in the Royal Navy and fought in World War II, and I am lucky to be able to say that both survived. So we're talking today to my mother, June Heaton, about my grandfather, Charles Ernest Brazier. Would you like to tell me first of all what Grandad did during the war?
He was in the Battle of Crete, Battle of Dunkirk, on the destroyers were over there. I think one of them, I'm quite sure, there's HMS Kelvin. I think he was on one of them.
And what did he do? What was his job?
Ammunitions and torpedoes when he was in the submarines, things like that. Okay. Weapons, then you could say.
So he would do things with ammunitions
and weapons. He was a CPO, which is a Chief Petty Officer.
And how long was he actually in the Royal Navy for?
He ran away to sea when, I think it was the last of the old sailing ships. I think he said he was about 13 or 14 at the time, because my grandfather was a farmer and my dad just did not want to do farming, and he ran away to sea. And in those days, they took him on board, and that was that really.
So we were specifically going to be talking about World War II and the fact that he had shell shock, which today would be known as PTSD, after the war. Can you tell me your recollections of then? Because obviously, how old were you then?
Not very old. I would say around between 10 and 12, 10, 11, 12-ish. It was after the war. And I can remember my brother, my mother and I went to meet him off the train at Portsmouth Harbour. And this was because he was coming home for like a leave, really. He was in Cholmondeley Castle, and they put them there to recover from what they used to call shell shock.
He went to Cholmondeley Castle.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Well, only that it was a place for people that were severely in shock. And as I was trying to say, when we met Dad off that train, because I was very excited, at that sort of age you would be, I'm going to see my dad and all this sort of thing. And I was horrified, and I couldn't stop crying inside myself because Dad couldn't walk, he shuffles, he couldn't talk, he stuttered, and he couldn't get my name out of his mouth. And it took us ages. I think we missed about 2 ferries. It took us ages to get from the station down to where you got on the ferry. And then, of course, we had to get him off the ferry, the other side. And then trying to get him on a bus was a joke.
Okay.
So
the ferry, was that Portsmouth to Gosport ferry?
Yeah.
Because you lived in Gosport at the time.
Yes. And then, of course, it took us ages to get from the bus stop to our bungalow. And by this point on, I was really broken, I think. and I just grabbed the dog, Judy dog, and the dog lead, and I just walked. I know I walked. And then I didn't want to go back home. I know I didn't want to go back home. But of course you have to in these situations, don't you? And in time you get over it, but I know that Dad was put on, I suppose, he was on to Mazepam, can't get the word out, to Mazepam, I know, almost up until the day he died. Because the doctors did try to get him off it, but they, by this time I think he was hooked on it.
I want to talk to you a little bit about, I disturbed a memory that you had when I started weaving, and I had a table loom on the table, and I can remember you coming up to me and saying that the noise of the shuttle going backwards and forwards had triggered a memory. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, because Dad had a weaving loom. They were encouraged, obviously at Cholmondeley, to have occupation and art and craft or whatever it was. And Dad bought this loom, which drove my mother up the wall. And of course, in those days we only had a radio. You didn't have anything else. And of course, you're listening to a radio program, and you've got this clonk, clonk, clonk. And then not only that, but it took up the table, and we lived in a bungalow which was very small, and of course we couldn't use the table until Daddy had finished what he was doing.
His weaving.
And he made some very pretty, actually it was. It was pink and blue, and it was like a lace, squares, and he used to tie these squares up in the middle and then cut, and he used to make flowers out of that, and they were made for dressing tables.
Okay.
Because Dad sold quite a few of those, I remember. Yeah.
Okay.
The only trouble is they didn't wash very well.
Okay.
Because they all went in together, which was not a bad idea really, because people needed new ones.
Okay, so he was taught to weave at Cholmondeley Castle, and that was to help him with his shell shock.
Yeah, and then he made scarves, and with the squares and the half diamond, that shape, like the art shape, and he did all those. Yeah, he made quite a bit on that loom. Clunk clunk.
How long did he do that for?
I would say for about 3 or 4 years, really. And then he got into model yachting, and he used to go down Walpole Park, and anybody in Gosport of my age group would know my dad, I think, because he was heavily involved with the Submariners and also the yacht club. Mum and Dad Mum did the teas down there, and yeah.
So the 3 or 4 years that he was doing the weaving, did you see improvement in him?
Well, it kept him occupied, and all the time he wasn't occupied. He was occupied. He wasn't stressing out, was he?
Because you said that when he first came home, that he was shuffling.
Yeah.
And that he was stuttering.
Yes.
Now, obviously, I came along a lot later, but I don't remember Grandad stuttering or shuffling.
No, well, you wouldn't do, would you?
No, I just wondered how long he was like that for.
I can't put a time. To be fair and honest with you, I can't put a time on it.
Okay.
But I would assume that it must have been, sort of a good year or even more than that. But of course, it was gardening. It was keeping yourself going. It was, I suppose, relaxing.
Okay.
And even though he was, as I said, he was under quite a bit of medication. But when he got angry. And I always remember, he lost his temper quite quickly. And I always remember, I'll never forget it, my bicycle had a puncture. And, you know, Dad, as you do, he got the inner tube out and the bowl of water, and he was trying to find the hole. And he couldn't find the hole in this thing. And all of a sudden, he picked up my bike and he literally threw it from the back door where he was, right the way down to the fish pond. My bike.
Okay.
And I'll never forget that, ever. It was just so frightening. But then, afterwards, he calmed down. That was an effect of the shell shock, which to a child of my age as I was then was shock horror.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, Mum, you know, sort of calmed him down, gave him a cup of tea or whatever she did. You know, so he calmed down. He was all right after that. But we did have episodes like that, which, you know, as I say, to a child, which, of course, by the time you came along, which was, good, quite a few years later, he'd surpassed all that, you know, although he was still on his, you know, temazepam, whatever it was.
So do you think that the hobbies that he had, I mean, obviously the weaving was the initial thing, and something that he'd learnt almost as an occupational therapy, but then later on, in the later years, with the model yachting,
that definitely helped him.
And then also the gardening, because obviously he loved his fish pond, didn't he? And
he also got a job working for a lady called Mrs. Hewitt, who used to live in Elmstone. He helped her with her gardening, and he used to work it like an allotment for her. He looked after her vegetable patches, and he brought us, obviously, goodies home from that. Mm-hmm. And he worked for her on a Saturday. I remember that.
And later in life, what was the sort of jobs that he did then? Did he stay in the Navy?
No, he was invalided out, basically.
Okay.
He was, you know, sort of.
So what other jobs? Didn't he work at a firework factory at one point?
Yeah, he works for Paynes Wessex. Yes, he did. Again, it was all to do with weaponry, and he was MOD.
Okay, what did he do for the
MTBs?
Can you explain what an MTB is?
Motor torpedo boat.
Was that during the war, or...?
No, it was after the war. And again, it was towards the end of... Because he was in the Vernon, HMS Vernon, as it was then. And I always remember, because of clothing coupons and everything else, you can just imagine. I always remember Dad saying, well, I'll meet you, come down to the ferry. And I went on to where the submarines were berthed. And Dad came along in his motor torpedo boat. And he took me along by Stokes Bay for a ride on this motor torpedo boat thing, because they had to go to Stokes Bay Pier at that point, because Stokes Bay did have a pier. And of course he put it up to full speed, didn't he? And I got absolutely drenched in seawater. And of course, when I got home, dripping wet, my mother went absolutely mad at my coat. Said no coupons to buy another one. Can you imagine it? Oh, God.
So he got into a lot of trouble that day then?
Well, I did as well. It wasn't my fault, was it? I was drenched from head to foot. Oh, God.
Did he ever talk about his time at Dunkirk?
No. But till the day he died, well, you know, till the day he died, he always went out on the 11th of November.
Yes.
Yes. And he never missed. And they took him out. He was in the War Memorial Hospital. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And they put him in a wheelchair. And he had his berry and his medals. And he got out there, even though he was dying himself.
Yeah.
He got out there. And he got out there for his mates, as he called them. Never gave up on that. Never.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he died a few days later,
Yeah, he did.
in recollection.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we've got a photograph of him. We had a photograph. Mum's saying that she can't find it at the moment, but I'm sure we will find it.
Yeah, I had a big one enlarged of that, which I gave to the Submariners Association.
Yeah,
because they came and they marched at my father's funeral. Yeah, they did.
The Submariners Association, I know that he also had quite a big link with HMS Alliance, which is the museum down Gosport Way, which is a submarine, and he was one of the first guides on that, and he used to tell his stories. I can remember when I was probably about 18 or 19, him sort of talking his war stories and us chuckling in the background as he was being probably the longest.
I know. Dad used to get into
guide.
trouble. Yeah, Dad used to get into trouble because he did like to talk, my dad, and he was a great guide, and people asked questions, and Dad took his time and answered them, I suppose, really. And of course, and being a submariner and everything else, he had a lot of stories to tell. And they used to say, "Come on, Charlie, move on, move on, move on," because the other guides wanted to pass him, and there was Dad still talking.
And obviously not a lot of room in a submarine.
No, there's not a lot of room in the submarine. Yes, but yeah.
And he had managed to get quite a few artefacts, I believe, in the museum there by talking to people. And
Oh yeah, he's a great founder.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yes.
I can remember there was a piece of cake that he was talking to somebody about, a piece of wedding cake or something, and I think that's in the museum because it was never eaten, and I think that was down to him talking to somebody that had come to see the submarine.
Yeah.
That a story. Is there anything else that you would like to tell our listeners about the use of hobbies and crafts, etc., to help our mental awareness?
Well, definitely, if you've got, if you occupy your hands, put it that way, it's certainly you're doing something. So it makes the brain think of other things rather than dwelling on bad things. So if you're creating something, you're involved in that creation, and you tend to forget, you go into another world, if you like. But mentally, it helps you tremendously, in my opinion.
I know with Grandad, obviously he started with the weaving, then he went on to his model yachting, where obviously he would look after the boats and polish them. That would take him time.
Oh yeah, exactly. And then because when Dad first started, they were just ordinary sailing boats, and they had to go around the buoy. They had all these, and they had loads of other people were with them as well, and they used to have these races. But then in time, they went on to radio-controlled model yachts, which was new in those days. And then, Mum and Dad were heavily involved in the international races that they had down Walpole Park in Gosport. I don't know whether they still do. Couldn't tell you.
Okay.
But Mum and Dad were definitely heavily involved in that. Yes.
And also then his gardening and the fish pond. And obviously that helped to relax him. From what I'm hearing you say is that it doesn't matter what your pursuit is, what your hobby or craft is, and that you can change and develop.
Oh yeah, of course you can. Absolutely. I know in my own little world here, I've changed from my embroidery, and I went on to do the Chinese art, which I've thoroughly enjoyed doing. But there again, I went in a strop. I went in a strop because I couldn't afford. I wanted something different, and I couldn't. Well, we didn't have a lot of money, and I couldn't afford. It was £150 or something for a course in watercolours, or so. And I thought, I can't afford that. And then I happened to see in Cranley Arts Centre that they had a free day of this Chinese art. And I thought, I don't even like, the images of Chinese thing. So I went in a bit of a strop, but I went because it was free. And then, of course, I got hooked. I got totally hooked on it. And I got hooked on it because I can't really draw. I'm not a drawer. I've never drawn. But with the Chinese way, they do it in such a way, like if you're drawing a bird, they just do a dot for the eye. And then they come over for the head, like in a half C, the letter C, half. And it, like a swan would be a figure 2.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that. And it all made sense to me. And then you put a V on the front for the beak. And then you can really create. You can create. And there was I, not being able to do anything. And I got so elated. And I came home and I was so happy, singing away in the car on the way home. I did it! Yay! And then I've done a lot since, sort of. And it was a learning curve. And it just shows you that no matter how down you are, you can come up, and you can come up big time. If you just got to find it, you've got to look for it. And if you don't go out there and not like I did, I don't want to do this, I'm not going to do this, and went through that door in a strop, and I came out on a high. It just shows you, really, that you can do it. You can.
Okay, well, thank you very much for giving your time and your memories of Grandad, and we will speak to you again soon. I'd like to thank my mother June for wanting to share these memories with us on Creative Sparks. And before we close, I'd like to share with you a couple of poems. The first is the Girl Guide poem we used to sing to the buglers' taps. Day is done, gone the sun, from the lake, from the hills, from the sky. All is well, safely rest. God is nigh. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there, I did not die. That was Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep by Mary Elizabeth Fry. And finally, in the words of Winnie the Pooh by A. Milne, if ever there is tomorrow when we're not together, there is something you must always remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. But the most important thing is, even if we're apart, I'll always be with you. If you have a hobby, a passion for the outdoors, or a simple love for crafting that has helped you through a tough time, I really would love to hear from you. Your experience could be the beacon of hope someone else needs to hear. You can reach out to me via email at loraine@graciousmountain.co.uk or find us on social media at Echoes from the Mountain or Gracious Mountain Therapies. Or why not visit the website on www.graciousmountain.co.uk. I am Loraine from Gracious Mountain Therapies, and you have been listening to Echoes from the Mountain, Creative Sparks D-Day special. Tomorrow is story time, and I will be reading the 3rd chapter from Heidi by Joanna Spyri. I hope you will join me. Till then, take care. And remember, you are not alone on this journey of discovery. Together, we can create a chorus of resilience.